But when you hear those kinds of things, you hear those kinds of ideas that, yes, we accept you, we welcome you, now please change. That has been our history since diaspora, since the temple was destroyed over 2,000 years ago, since we left our land and lived among other peoples in many different places all over the world and in many different situations under Muslim rule, under Christian rule. They weren't allowed to own land, they weren't allowed into the professions, but money lending and banking they were allowed to do. And they were brought in and welcomed, and we need your resources and your abilities, and it's fantastic. Until the loans come due, the Jewish community would be exiled from the place that had just welcomed them. The times when the Jews felt the most comfortable, the most part of the most advanced society on earth was 20th century Germany. And when we hear even presidential candidates saying things like, we can exclude a certain group of people because of their religious identity, it should worry all of us. And as Jews, it's a story we've heard. Any group needs to define itself by its boundaries. How do you know who you are? Judaism in many ways is best defined not as religion, not even as culture, perhaps as tribe. Once you are a member of the tribe, we owe something to you, you owe something to us, you are family. There was a time, and it was yesterday, when gays and lesbians were really not considered to be included. Those walls, those barriers are all breaking down. Thank God.
Fall, there was a remarkable event in Washington, New York, and Philadelphia, and that was the visit of our Holy Father, Pope Francis. And it was a big occasion for the country, not just Catholics, but every person of goodwill. He has been able somehow, by dint of personality and his welcoming, important for our gathering tonight, trying to pull people in and together. And he has gotten quite a bit of pushback in Rome itself, but he doesn't care. He's the Pope. If you were to go back 100 years or 200 years, that event probably could not have taken place. It would have been viewed as subversive gatherings of popery. Growing up in the 50s, we were basically afraid of Protestants. We didn't go into Protestant churches. We just didn't, I remember telling a little girl across the street that she was going to hell because she wasn't a Catholic. And this was from the church fathers. Outside of the church, there is no salvation. And it was interpreted in a very strict fashion, beyond what the original intention was. Anti-Catholicism, which took root in Europe and in England, came over to America on the Mayflower. Every police captain, I think, was an Irishman. Even as that grew, anti-Catholicism and Catholics in general were considered a greater and greater threat. Oregon, from its origin, was a bigoted state. The Ku Klux Klan was very, very strong. There were very few blacks. Their antagonism and anger and bile was directed against Catholics. And in particular, the Catholic school system, which they considered un-American. Goes with it. And some of the criticism of Vatican II was that we assimilated so well and so much, and in fact had so much catching up to do, that some of who we are was lost. Now, Pope Francis, fortunately, has come into the world with his arms wide open. He talks about the church as a field hospital, that when somebody comes in and they're dying, the first thing you don't ask them is what they believe. The church is a big, old, lumbering institution, I like to say. And there's plenty of room on the right and on the left, in the middle, and everywhere else.
In contrast with the experience of many Jews in America, many Catholics in America, Episcopalians are used to running things. So it's a very different historical context to come at this question of who's in, who's out, because we never really had to ask that question, right? Like, I mean, we knew you were in, and if you had to ask whether you were in or not, you probably weren't in. Right? What it means to be intentionally, not just quietly accepting of folks who have historically not been included in church circles, but to kind of take the next step of saying, this is what we're about. This maybe is a primary aspect of mission for us, right? Everybody's welcome here, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of gender, regardless of socioeconomic circumstance. Like, now, you look out in the pews on Trinity on a Sunday morning, and I don't know how many of those people have been baptized. You know, we say communion is open to anybody. Right? Why should I be baptized? And like, well, you know, does it get me anything? Well, no, you can still receive Eucharist. Well, no, I mean, you know, basically, like, if you're hanging out with us, like, you're an Episcopalian. If you say you are, sure, awesome. You say you're Buddhist, yeah, sure, whatever. I mean, like, we have atheists on vestry, you know, like, those sort of things. That is that we wrestle with what we believe, right? We're a little, you know, we're a little loose in terms of coming to clear convictions. And we value permeable boundaries. That's a piece of what makes our tribe a tribe. And I think it has more to do with following the model of a rabbi who ate with women and ate with sinners. And when he spread his Last Supper, invited the people who were going to betray him to that table.